Hi, this is Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus, and we're on part 4 of a small series about memorial stones. And this may be the last episode of this series, or I may, if I can get an interview with somebody that I want to, there may be one more episode to this. But if not, then we'll be just going on into Passover, which, as I've mentioned before, I see as the ultimate memorial stone. And so I've been using this series about memorial stones to segue from Esther into Passover. And because I think that these are all things that are important and that will help us to build our faith and to learn to trust God and to obey Him more. So, anyway, I hope that you did the assignment that I gave last time, which was to think of something that God's done for you. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small, but to think of that and to hopefully write about it in the comments below and share how you're going to remember that, what you're going to use as a trigger. It can be something physical like a rock, or it can be something like a holiday, or it can be some other thing like something that happens in your life every day that you use as a trigger to remember that. But just some way of reminding yourself about that so that you can grow from it the way that God wants you to. So today I'm going to talk about one other way that I have found to be very effective as a memorial stone, and that's journaling. And sometimes my journaling kind of borders on scrapbooking. so, um, but what I'm saying is, it's putting in writing the things that God either has done in my life or has asked me to do and how He's shown Himself faithful through that, or writing about the things that God has taught me. And probably most of my journaling is about things that God has taught me, and most of my closer to scrapbooking is about things that God has done. And sometimes those are really big things. So like I wanted to have this to show you today, and I found it up at our house in the mountains, and I thought that I brought it down with me, but apparently I set it aside and didn't bring it, so I don't have it to show you, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway, and I'll tell you the story behind it. So I grew up in California, in Northern California, and I differentiate that because it's a lot different from Southern California, so it's not what you usually hear about and read about. It's a lot different culture. It's not like the whole beachy scene LA kind of thing or anything like that. I was born in San Francisco, and then I lived in the Bay Area just south of San Francisco for all of my growing up life. And we we were living in Los Banos. We were very, very involved in a church. In fact, I was super involved in teaching and helping out in the office and stuff. And so it was really our home. And most of my life, the church that I've been involved in has probably been most of what my life is built around. So just to set up the scene, I wasn't anxious to leave the church. It was a really important part of my life. Well, my daughter and I came out to East Tennessee to visit a friend who flew us out, who they eventually got married. And anyway, while we were out here, I felt very strongly like God was saying that He wanted us to move out here. And I was like, you've got to be joking. No. But He kept saying this, and I have this commitment that I will go any place God tells me to go and do anything He tells me to do. So I finally said, okay. Like 2 days before we left, we were here for 10 days, and a couple days before we left, and I knew that whole time that I was going to say yes, but I was just really, really struggling with it and putting up a fight. And when I said yes, there was just like this tremendous peace in my heart. And anyway, so I went home and I told my husband, which is not my current husband, but I told my husband then that I felt like God was saying that we were supposed to move there. And he said no. And to be honest, I was a little relieved because it was like, okay, we're not moving, God. I did my part and we're not moving. But what God said to me was from Proverbs that the king's heart is like water in the hands of the Lord. And it was like, okay, if the king's heart is like water in your hands, God, that I know that you can change his heart. So I determined not to nag him about it. I brought it up maybe 3 times in the next 4 months, and but mostly just left it to God to do. And finally, I was actually at a friend's house. I had gone there to help her, and I was staying with her for a few days. And he called me and he said, "I think we should go out to Tennessee and check things out." And I was like, "Wow, okay." Maybe we really are going to have to go through with this. And so anyway, so we went out to Tennessee, and he really liked it. And he said, "But there aren't jobs." And at the time, he didn't have a job in California either. And so that kind of had something to do with his willingness to come. And he said, "Okay, if I can find a job here, then we'll move here." Well, within a couple hours, he found a job. And he ended up, when we went home, he had to turn right around and go back to Tennessee. And he lived in Tennessee while the kids and I got the house ready to sell. Okay, so during that whole time, while we were getting the house ready to sell, what God put on my heart to do is a memorial stone, which I wanted to show you. And when I find it, I'll show it to you because it's pretty cool. But he had me put together a journal, which, like I said, was a little scrapbooky because I put in a lot of things. Just telling about how God had done this, and also writing in it each day while we were getting the house ready, the things that God was doing, because it really was incredible the way that he was working things out for us to be able to go. Like, for instance, I was in a group of intercessors, and we met every week up in this upper room in our church, and we were praying. And one time, one of the elders, who had no clue that we were thinking about moving because we hadn't told anybody yet, my best friend who lived 2 hours away knew, and that was pretty much it. And so there was no way that the elder knew. But he said, "God is moving you from the bitter waters to the sweet waters." And the town we were moving to was Sweetwater. And there were other prophecies during that time too about how God was going to move me to another place. And some of them were just like really specific. And I wrote them down in this book, in this journal. And then other things, it's like, because this was kind of a big thing, and it really seemed impossible. It really, really seemed impossible. There were times when I just wasn't sure we were going to make it. We didn't have the money to pay the mortgage on the house. We didn't have the money to pay the electric bill. I didn't have a car there, and just all these things. It was really, really difficult. Well, so one of the examples of something that I put in there was I taped a penny on one page, and then I wrote about it. And the reason I taped a penny there was because a number of years before that, my 3 oldest children and I had walked on a prayer walk, which I mentioned, I think, in the last video. And one of the men on that, who my kids called Bunny Man because he had a bunny in his pocket that his wife had given him to remember her while he was on this walk away from her for 6 weeks, Bob Schultz, he taught us that whenever we saw a penny on the road, and when you're walking for 40 days, you're going to see a lot of pennies on the road, that whenever we saw a penny on the road, we should pick it up and say, "God will never leave me nor forsake me." Oh, I meant to have this open in my Bible, but it's from Hebrews 13, and I want to read you the passage because it'll help you to understand why that had this effect. So Hebrews is right before James. It's in the New Testament, close to the end. So in Hebrews 13, it says, "Make sure that your character is free from the love of money." So he's talking about money here. "Being content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you." And I think in the King James it says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." "So that we confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me?" So picking up pennies became a memorial stone to my children and me, because every time we would pick up a penny and we would say, "God will never leave me nor forsake me." And we kind of made it into a game that if we found a dime, we had to say it 10 times. And one time my daughter found a $20 bill, so we were teasing her about how she had to say it 2,000 times. But anyway, saying this was a memorial stone. It reminded us that even when we have financial problems, God is going to take care of us. And one day, well, there was a friend of mine from church who offered to take care of my 2 youngest children a few days a week for a few hours so that I could work on packing, because it was really hard to pack with two really small children. And so she did that, and I didn't have a car. So I was walking one day to go pick them up, and I saw a penny on the ground. And I was really worried about finances at that time because I had no money to get food. And I picked up the penny and I said, God will never leave me nor forsake me. Meaning not just God will never leave me nor forsake me, but that whole passage that I just read to you, that God would provide the money that we need. And he did. I don't remember how he provided it, but he provided. We never went hungry. Our electricity was never turned off. We always had everything that we needed. So I taped the penny from that day in that journal scrapbook. And so that scrapbook is a memorial stone for me, for anybody else who reads it, because I've written out the whole story of what God did bringing us here. And there was a lot of things that he did, and a lot of ways that he, when I started doubting, which I started doubting a lot of times, I'm just being honest. My faith isn't always that great, but I started doubting sometimes, and there were just incredible ways that he made it clear that, yes, this wasn't just my imagination. I didn't make this up about moving there. He really did want us to move there, and so he was going to make it happen. And so that's all throughout that notebook. And right now I'm doing a similar thing. Bill and I, gosh, 2 or 3 years ago, when we were living in Maryland, Bill, I came home from work one day and Bill said, you know, we could live any place in the world because most of our income is from things that we do online. I was working at that point in a store, but that was just bringing in a little bit of our income. And what we really wanted to do was be completely online. And so we started looking at different places. You know, do we want to move to Europe? You know, well, we have the animals, we had his knitting machines. It just would have been really difficult. And we're Americans, so we really wanted to stay in America. And so we looked at all different states and everything. Anyway, eventually we decided on East Tennessee, which is where we're living now, but not where we ultimately are going to be living. And so we came down one time to have our realtor just kind of show us what was possible. And on that, we found the house that we knew we were supposed to have. And so in this notebook, I've put in pictures, and I've written about, you know, what our dream is, what we're, the story behind the house that we're moving into, the guy who built it, because there's quite a story there, and just lots of different things about what we're going through, and it has not all been easy, believe me. Sometimes it's been really, really difficult, and sometimes it feels like we are never going to get there, and it's just so discouraging. But the thing is that when you know that God has called you to do something, when you know that he has put you on the path to doing something, you know you are going to get there. And because I went through all of this in moving to Tennessee, and because I took the time to write that journal, scrapbook, whatever you want to call it, even when I didn't look at it, having gone to all that effort really instilled that in my heart. And so it's a lot easier for me to believe and to trust God that this is going to happen, even when at times it seems like it's not possible. And it just seems like all of our stuff is up there and we're down here with nothing. And it's just crazy. And you know, we've got 2 houses that we're trying to sell, which we need the money from those to be able to finish that house. And also on our income, trying to maintain 3 houses is, you know, people look at you when you say you have 3 houses and they think you're rich. No, you have 3 houses, you're poor. Because it costs a lot of money to keep those houses up, and we're not living in 2 of them. And we're not renting them either because we're trying to sell. And so sometimes it can just be really discouraging and scary. And the fact that I took the time to write about the experience of God moving us out here has helped me a lot through that, especially because I tend to be very emotional. And as an artist, I'm very melodramatic. Just have that personality, and so it's either, you know, good or bad, nothing's in between. And so that has just really, really strengthened my faith. And so I wanted to mention journaling and scrapbooking as a memorial stone and a way that you can build your faith, that you can memorialize that, and it also passes it on to others. I know that my mom writes in her journal every single day when she does her devotions, and I've asked to inherit those, because those journals are going to be precious, because they're just full of everything that God's been teaching her. And oh my word, what a treasure trove, you know? And I can't think of anything more valuable than that. And I hope that I don't get them very soon. Even though I'd like to learn the lessons from them, I hope that my mom doesn't pass very soon. I hope that she's still here with us for a long time. But anyway, so those journaling, and for me, another example of how journaling really helped me was when I was going through a couple of years that were hard, but also profound. And I knew that God was teaching me a lot of stuff. And so I was writing down a lot of it. I filled 20 journal notebooks in 2 years. And not necessarily even writing everything out. Sometimes it was just writing like a couple sentences so that I would remember something, or even just like a list of things, because I didn't have time to sit and write paragraphs. And you know, when you write to memorialize something, it doesn't have to be written out as a story. Just write it, or take pictures, or, you know, and put a couple comments under it, or tape a penny there, or whatever, just whatever is going to help you remember, and maybe write a little bit about it so that somebody else reading it, or you reading it 20 years later, will know what that's about. But you don't have to write a whole long story. You can, and honestly, that would be the best. But if you don't have time for that, then just do something smaller. And so anyway, so those notebooks, at the end of those 2 years, there was a point where I was able to come up for breath. And I kept feeling like, I need to sit down with these notebooks, and I need to read through them and kind of process all that God's been doing in the last couple of years, because it was a lot. And it was just like overwhelming in its difficulty and in just its amazing stuff that God was doing. And so I started saving change, because we didn't have a lot of money. I was saving change so that maybe I could take a weekend away in a motel in a town nearby. And anyway, so a friend of mine called me. She had moved to Colorado a year or two before that. And she called me up and she said, my husband wants me to take some time off. And so he's sending me to Hawaii. And he said that I could take somebody with me. And I was that person. So it was like, you know, God was reaffirming that I needed that time away to process this. And she said that what she needed to do was she needed to go there and, yeah, spend some time together, that we would be talking and stuff, and, you know, seeing the sights and everything. But she also needed time to just process things. And so it was just perfect, because we both had time apart where we were processing. And sometimes we'd drive someplace really beautiful and sit on a hill looking out over the ocean. And we would each be doing our own thing and praying and reading through our journals and writing and everything. And then other times we would drive someplace and we would be talking as we drove. So we were processing together. And it was just really, really good. And I think that we each built each other's faith in that process too. So that's another way that journaling can be used to kind of write things down as you're going through them, so that you don't forget them, so that you have the time to process them too. And I hope that my journals will be a blessing to people after me as well, just like I know that I will be blessed by my mom's journals. And so anyway, so I just wanted to encourage you to do that. And then also, recently, like about 2 months ago, I stumbled on this on YouTube. It's been going on for a few years, but junk journals, have you heard of these? They're like so cool. Anyway, just look for junk journals on YouTube, and you'll get like 1,000 videos. And some are tutorials of how to make them, and some are just flip throughs showing you one that somebody's made or one that somebody's using. But what they are is they're like scrapbooks, but they're kind of like shabby chic bohemian kind of thing, which I really get into. So that's part of why I like it. But the thing that I really love about it is that they're perfect as a memorial stone, because they have pockets and they have little cards that you can write on, that you can pull out of a pocket, and envelopes and stuff like that. So it's just perfect for not just writing in, but also putting things in that help you to remember something. Like, you know, you could do one about your vacation, and you can put in tickets of things that you went to and brochures and stuff, but there would also be things that you put in there about what God did and what God showed you on that vacation. And that's all kind of interwoven together, so that it's like this really cool thing for you. And when you put the work into something like that, it helps reinforce it, but it's also something that would be lovely to pass on to future generations, and it's interactive. And so I'm really excited about the whole junk journal thing, and I've made a few of them, given them away, and I'm making some to sell, and I'm making some for myself and for gifts and stuff like that, because I just, right now, I see this as being just an amazing way of being able to carry out this whole memorial stone idea. And so I wanted to pass that on to you. Look for them. If you like crafting, then you would probably really enjoy making some for yourself. If not, you can find them for sale all over the place. Check on Etsy especially. And I may have some to sell at some point, I'm not sure. But anyway, so just look into that if you like to write or you like to scrapbook, because that's a really good option as a memorial stone. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think that that's just a lot of fun, and it's a great way to memorialize your faith and to pass that on to those in the future. And with that, I just want to say I love you. Next time we will start talking, well, we might have an interview with somebody about memorial stones. If not, then we will start talking about Passover. All right, I love you all. Goodbye.